Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode of the Middle West podcast. I'm your host Taqib Musa, and with me is my co-host Abdul Sami Arjumand.
Assalamu alaikum.
And Assad Hussain.
Assalamu alaikum.
I just realized I did it again. I said is, and then I mentioned both of you, so grab.
You mentioned him first as well. I should be mentioned first.
No, this is the order. This is the order.
Today we're joined by a very special guest, Marwan Akari.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa barakatuh. So thanks for joining us. Marwan has a very illustrious history. He's a very inspiring individual. So he's from Ireland, but he's not really, but he is. But also he's done stuff with FOSIS, with different ISOCs in Ireland. He's worked for Google, which for me is the biggest thing because he's worked at the temple of capitalism and come out of it without being affected. Which
the thing is, when you said this, the face I saw on Assad, mashallah, the socialist in the house has been offended.
Well, I think he's more than a socialist. He's our resident communist who.
Well, I study at SOAS now, so that might be something we have in common.
What? Socialism,
communism.
It's absolutely like a socialist university.
The S in SOAS stands for socialism.
Socialist Oriental.
Huh?
No, of course not.
That's school, isn't it? I'm sure.
If anyone's just listening to that and they just heard that sound, I bet that was very, that's really opened up your marriage options, hasn't it?
Alhamdulillah.
But Marwan, please enlighten us with your beautiful Irish accent. But also, we want to get to the bottom of this great story. Where did you come from? And we ask this question usually. Are you a freshie? Are you on my team, or are you with these guys who look down on freshies
are you
for no
British?
good reason?
Are you original?
I'm definitely not British.
He's definitely not
Alhamdulillah.
British.
So
take
that off the table.
Are you a Westerner or are you like fake and fresh?
Oh, like we're jumping straight into deep questions, huh?
just
Okay.
Well, the question is, how deep did you jump off the boat?
Oh,
you can't make boat jokes, man. That's just it's too soon. It's
Too
always
soon.
going to be too soon. It's permanently too soon
Way
to
too
make any
soon.
boat joke. But yes, you, I believe, came across the Mediterranean.
On a boat.
yeah. So I'm originally from.
What?
Actually, subhanallah, we actually flew over. Interestingly enough, but we'll get to that. So I'm originally from Libya. Well, my parents are from Libya. I was born in Jordan on the way over. Not in a boat.
In the plane.
No.
Subhanallah.
Have you got one of those UN passports?
No. I don't.
What's a
Unfortunately.
UN passport?
You guys don't know what UN
This is
passport
great.
is?
I'd like
I-
one
I
of those.
don't-
That's for refugees in refugee camps.
What about people who are born in air?
Huh?
People who are born in air?
I don't think that's true.
People who are born in air
I thought they
have
just
a special
get
status.
Yeah, but most of
some
them
sort.
probably get
Okay, they don't have a UN
their
passport.
parents' passport or something.
So here's the thing: I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, but they're eligible for the parents' nationalities, but also the nationality of either where the plane originated from, as in the registration of the plane itself. So if it's Ryanair, then you're eligible for Irish citizenship, or where that plane departed.
Yeah.
Oh, so is that why you have a Bangladeshi passport? Because you were born on a plane flying from Bangladesh?
Bangla.
Well,
I have a
surprisingly
proud
enough,
Pakistani.
so I was born in a hospital in Jordan.
So
And
was I. Not in Jordan, but yeah.
That's something we all have in common.
We actually drove past my hospital.
I wasn't given a Jordanian passport. I wasn't given anything actually by the Jordanians. We were actually given a fine.
Oh, wow, for being born.
Yeah.
So you've been breaking the law since day one.
Yeah, that's me. I came into this earth
Best
breaking the
Assalamu
law.
alaikum into the world, isn't it?
Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
You see how the
Well,
Irish have always been causing problems. The Irish have always been causing problems.
I came as a burden immediately to my parents. So
I didn't even think he was Irish by then.
no.
That's true. That's true.
I wasn't Irish for many years. Yeah.
Okay, so Jordan.
Yeah, I was born in Jordan. We arrived in Ireland in 1997, so around 3 years after that. It was a bit of a journey. My parents are political activists they were political activists back in Libya, and of course they came here escaping the Libyan regime, which was Gaddafi's regime back then. And then we were raised and we grew up in Ireland. Since then, I was raised in Dublin, as you can tell by my not very strong Irish accent. I mean, I don't know where you guys want me to go with the story from here.
Is Dublin in Ireland or is that North Ireland?
No,
Bro,
No,
what are
this
you
is the
doing?
Republic.
What are you doing?
I'm
This
not
guy,
Irish.
no, this
Who brought
guy's
this
a
Palestine
villager.
here?
He's a villager. This guy.
I know study much.
Rochdale, Manchester. That's it. That's all you know.
So Belfast is the capital of Northern Ireland, which is part of the UK. Alhamdulillah.
I know North Park.
No,
I know
fair.
that.
You know,
I just
they-
don't know
Listen,
where.
If I
this
was
is a,
them,
this is a
I would
touchy
bring,
topic.
yeah.
I'm all for the unification of the Irish
See, I used
Isle.
to get confused
Oh my
between-
days.
I used to get confused between, this is ages ago, Belfast, Dublin, and Berlin.
Berlin.
Yeah, I know. But I know it's in Germany, but it sounds the same. I used to get confused between.
Well, it's because in communism you don't have cities. You just have one.
Yeah.
One.
Have
Back
you
in
heard
high
of-
school?
Have you heard of something that's round called a globe?
Yeah.
You should get one of those.
Oh, should I? I'm standing on one right now, so I don't really need to get one.
That's quite deep,
SubhanAllah.
actually.
But yes, so fast forwarding a little bit. So
Going into
You-
Dublin, sorry.
Yes.
I guess you've now been living in London, for quite a few years. How was it like in Dublin in terms of for the Muslim community? When you were that young, and compare it to London, for example. Because I guess the one thing about being from the UK, especially when I travel around a lot, people ask me about how life is. I'm like, basically, it feels like I'm in a Muslim country in the sense that, alhamdulillah, there's a good amount of Muslims that are, in the UK, a lot of mosques that are established, a lot of institutes, a lot of schools, madrasas and stuff. So how is life as a young Muslim in Ireland for you specifically?
I would just warn you that Abdusami is trying to pivot this whole conversation to get you to say London is great because he
London
thinks
is amazing.
London is the center
Oh,
of the universe.
by the way,
It's
guys,
best
we are
place.
in London today.
Yes, we are. We have trekked all the way down, and Abdusami was
Welcome,
still late,
welcome.
despite
Ahlan wa
despite
sahlan.
us coming all these.
The reason why I was late
Miles,
was
yeah.
because I was traveling from the other side of London, just to show how amazing and how big
How was the
London
traffic?
is. No, I came from the
Answer
other
the
side.
question. How was the traffic?
Listen here, Sadiq Khan has got a thing against
So
me.
in miles,
Sadiq Khan,
in miles from where you were
from
to
my house
here,
to
how
this
many
house,
miles was that?
Like 7, 8,
no,
10?
about 14 miles.
14 miles. Oh my days.
So that took you 10 minutes per mile.
That's
Is
mad.
that's 10 minutes per mile.
Yeah.
I blame Sadiq Khan.
Wallahi, but London's great.
I just blame London being rubbish. But
Yeah,
anyway,
I agree.
we are within the confines of the M25, which is the wall that contains the Yajuj
Unfortunately.
Majuj. So please, in Dublin, how did
Yeah.
you find your
That's actually a really
Muslim
good question.
community experience?
So when we arrived in Dublin, it was actually quite a young community. There's a lot less Muslims there. It's much younger. There's back then there was probably 10 to 20,000 Muslims in all of Ireland. Now we're looking at 70 to 80,000. So it's quite a
Is
small.
that for immigration? Oh.
Yeah.
Hashtag Group Sharia.
There you go. Actually there's been like a big portion of people coming over the last few years with all the revolutions that happened with Syria, etc. And Ireland is quite liberal, so they usually take in quite a lot of immigrants. But when we arrived in Ireland, my father, he worked at one of the Islamic centers, which is the main Islamic center, one of the most beautiful, actually probably more beautiful than any mosque here in London anyways.
Subhanallah.
It's not.
Shout out to the Islamic Cultural Center of Ireland.
I've been to
if anyone goes to
I've
Dublin.
I've been to ICCI, and not gonna lie, it's a very beautiful building, but it's just nowhere near as beautiful as.
As what? Give me a mosque that's more beautiful than it. Go on.
Okay, in terms of beauty, yes, but akhi, it's not about what the appearance. It's about what the masjid does. I mean, look at the East End Mosque.
Let me
mashallah, the amount
describe.
of
Let me
things they do.
describe this mosque for you. It's a mosque that also has 2 schools in it. It has a Quranic school. It has a community hall. It has a restaurant and a shop. And one of the things that this restaurant was described to me by Munawwara Ghani. I don't know if you guys have had her on, or she's mashallah one of the more active older sisters in this community. You will find more non-Muslims in that restaurant, which is in the confines of the mosque, than you will find Muslims.
Oh, I've seen this
A lot
mosque
of the
before.
times.
Okay, mashallah. So that's
So it's very open. Like the community feels very much, a part of it. Even the non-Muslim community, it's.
so you grew up around that mosque, basically.
Yeah, so that was my childhood. Like we grew up in that mosque. My father worked there. I went to the primary school there. I also went to the Libyan school.
Primary
and-
school inside the mosque.
Yes, in the mosque. It was a fully English school, but it was only for Irish school, but it was only for Muslims. We also went to Quran school and to Arabic school in the weekends. So my whole childhood was pretty much centered around that mosque, and it was really good because a lot of the Muslims that were there in that mosque were also from very similar backgrounds. All of us left our cousins and our uncles and our families back in Libya and in the Middle East or wherever it was. So we grew up as if everyone that was in that mosque was pretty much family.
Okay, and did you? Because we get this a lot in especially in like Birmingham, for example. We get some isolation, where people are tied around the mosque, and of course that's really good from a community perspective, especially where people have come from traumatic backgrounds. But do you think in Ireland, I get the impression that it's a bit better with, like Irish people seem to be more friendly and like people seem to, I don't want to say integrate, but you know. Like,
well, the Muslim community definitely has matured since then.
Has it integrated though?
They've
Because you're talking about a mosque that has a primary school in it
yeah.
that also has everything you need inside.
which is great.
It's a very different dynamic when you have like only a couple of thousand Muslims and when you have, you know, up to 100,000 Muslims. So of course now, you know, you have Muslim students or Muslims in all the schools across the country. You have them integrating, you have them building facilities a lot better, you know, that are in line with the Irish, and that kind of Irish identity is beginning to become built. Back then, you know, because you're very small, you know, you're just kind of trying to protect yourself or you're trying to build yourself. You know, as a community, you do tend to close yourself in. But I think one of the good things that has happened in Ireland is we haven't stayed like that. And that's probably to a large extent because of Irish people's attitudes, you know, their friendliness, the fact that we don't really get any animosity from them. So we have found it much easier to integrate into their, you know, into their schools, into universities.
What's Ireland's equivalent of the right wing?
It's very much non-existent. It's very small. You'll have some far right up north who are Protestants and who you know they're pretty much British and they get that, you know, from the British. But as Catholics and as people,
I like how you just blamed anything bad in Ireland. It comes from Britain. We're perfect as we are.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Assad, what do you think?
I don't want to comment on that.
They're like, this is my Irish now coming out. They're pretty much the cause of most of our issues, but we'll get to that.
I think even with like wider media outlets and stuff, because I know you've done some outreach work for I think for the masjid, where you've come on, or I don't know if it was with FOSIS or something, where you came on Irish. Well, I don't know.
It was
know
like
if
the
it was
equivalent of the Good Morning Show. Or something
Yeah,
like
so I done a few media appearances back when I was in Dublin. So one of them was with, you know, the equivalent of the Good Morning Show. Another one was in the national newspaper. And it wasn't as much FOSIS or the mosque, it was just a community thing. So they reached out to us. They wanted some young Muslims to come and represent themselves.
They reached out to you.
Yeah. They actually personally emailed me. Yeah, it was quite good.
You see over here, they reach out to the Quillian Foundation.
Now, even if they do reach out to you, they reach out to you just to nitpick your ideas.
But that's the thing, because it's such a young community, we have the ability to look at our neighbours here in the UK to realise, okay, we need to capture the narrative, we need to capture, you know, our voice, and to not, you know, we do have people that try to compete for our voice, who try to speak on behalf of Muslims in Ireland, who try to paint a different image than what actually is happening. So it's quite good to have the British experience right next to you, especially when you're so far behind it, I suppose.
I think in the car journey we were saying, I was speaking to you how
in your extremely long car journey.
We had a whole other podcast in the car journey.
But yeah, so I was saying that how because of how unsaturated Ireland is, especially compared to, for example,
that's a big word for you, isn't it?
Huh?
Wow.
Well, just because I'm engineer, I only speak 3 words. And
No, because last week you didn't know what inadvertently meant. Was that 2 weeks ago?
What does it mean again?
Inadvertently. I don't even know what it means now. Go on, carry on.
I think inadvertently is like it happens.
Inadvertent, like you don't mean, you don't want it to happen, but it's like.
But it happens anyway.
Yeah, carry on, please. Go on.
So London is very much saturated. Think about any kind of Islamic work you want to do, whether it be an Islamic bookshop or open up a Tarbiyah institute or whatever. It's in London, so it's very saturated. Whereas in Dublin, it's very unsaturated. So very much, and I think we can talk about this with another upcoming guest, hopefully very soon. But specifically about doing dawah work in Ireland or being that representative voice for Muslims in Ireland, because of how unsaturated it is, it's like literally an opportunity for you to actually go and grab it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's so true. SubhanAllah, like for me, this is something that I've always been very interested in. I probably saw this a lot from my father. So my father, as I mentioned growing up, he was working in the Islamic Cultural Center as a media officer there. But anytime he saw an opportunity, like he would go and he would pioneer in it. He brought the first book shops to the country, Islamic bookstores. He started, you know, Eid celebrations. He would be the one that would go and buy all the gifts and bring them to mosque so that the mosque would actually, you know, engage with the community better. So that sense of pioneering in the Muslim community is definitely something that has so much opportunity in Ireland. we were discussing here in London, you have everything. In Ireland, most Muslim students, most services don't exist. There's very little talbiyah programs. Even like the amount of knowledgeable people that speak English, very high quality English, there's not that many people. So it's a big opportunity for somebody to go in and, to be able to...
Is it still high quality English if it's in an Irish accent?
Because you can't even say the word three properly.
Funny enough,
Say the word
we
three.
pronounce
Say
our words better than you
three.
British lot, all right?
Say three.
Tree. 3. I can say 3, okay?
So how would you differentiate between someone saying 3 and tree?
You can tell.
No.
What if it's three trees?
Yeah, 3 trees.
3 trees.
3 trees.
No, but is he saying 3 trees or 3 trees?
Why would you say 3 trees?
What does 3 threes mean?
You could be saying 3 threes
guys,
because you're saying
guys,
3 threes
let's
on a sheet of paper.
3 like 3. Oh, this is
Three-
going
3 threes.
Exactly.
You guys,
3
if you guys want a lesson in the Irish accent, we can get to that. That's fine.
All you need to know is car. And
Car.
That's it. Car.
We like to pronounce our R's.
Car.
Yeah, so I'm part of the THR committee in FOSIS.
Oh, right,
so they're
okay.
always making fun of me, call me THR. So
What is
So
the...
yes,
yeah.
FOSIS. You've brought FOSIS up
Oh.
very
What
in
is
a very
FOSIS?
timely manner. Yeah, what is FOSIS? How did you get involved? What brought you into the student activism scene?
yeah, that's a long story.
So you asked what FOSIS was, then you said student activism. So you
Clearly.
answered your own question. But yeah.
So FOSIS is a national representative organization for Islamic societies across the UK and Ireland. It was set up 56 years ago, back in 1963, by a group of young Muslim students from across the Islamic societies. So I'm assuming the listeners know what Islamic societies are on
Yeah.
I
campuses,
guess
right?
just for the purpose of the listen, I was going to say viewers, but I just remembered we're not on video just yet. So just kind of briefly talk about Islamic society work, and then maybe go to what the Federation of Student Islamic Societies is.
So Islamic societies are basically young Muslims in universities organizing themselves around a society where they support each other, they organize things for each other, they organize socials and events and halaqas, as well as campaigning universities to open up prayer rooms and to open up other facilities. They're a way of Muslims to basically organize themselves in universities. And then FOSIS is the way that Islamic societies have organized themselves on a national level to support Islamic societies, to represent them on a national level, to provide services for them, etc.
What does it stand for?
FOSIS. So FOSIS is the Federation of Student Islamic Societies.
Nice name.
Yeah, it's quite a brand name.
It has become one, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. It's definitely, it has quite a powerful brand. Like even when you see the logo, I've met people from literally across the globe who knew of FOSIS, just from how powerful the brand has become. Like people from Canada to Malaysia. It's
Alhamdulillah, so that's good. So you're training in human resources.
yes.
So I think actually, you know what? We'll go into the structure and details of what FOSIS does in a bit. I still wanted to get a bit more of your motivation. So
Yep.
you went through kind of this. Was university the first time that you were in a non-all Muslim environment, or
No. So there's no Muslim secondary schools.
okay?
So you guys call it secondary school as well, right?
Yeah.
High school.
Yeah, high school, yeah. So there's no Muslim secondary schools. So we have to, it's only 200 Muslims that end up going to the primary school. A lot of Muslims go to non-Muslim primary schools. So in secondary school, I went through, I went to a Catholic school all 6 years. So, I was living, not living with them, but, I had Irish friends. We played with each other. We went to school with each other. We still did congregate as Muslims and come together. But
Okay, alhamdulillah. But yeah, so you went to university in Dublin.
yeah, University
then-
College Dublin.
Okay, and that's where you got involved with ISOC and FOSIS and all that.
What did you study at your undergraduate?
So my undergraduate was in structural engineering,
So you gone from engineering to
international management. Yes.
That's nice.
Oh, that's a very cool. So you did what? Why did you do engineering then? If you were gonna go off to do an
Well,
interesting.
we started university a lot younger than you guys. So I started university at the age of 16.
What?
Yeah. We don't have
You don't have college.
college. No. We jump straight. So we do our leaving certificate, which is like the A levels, and whatever you get in the leaving certificate, you go into university from there.
But it's the same length. The degree is the same length of time. 4 years, 3 years.
Yeah, 4 years and 3 years.
So you
yeah.
graduated from when you were 19, 20?
Yeah, about.
Oh wow! So I didn't know this. So Irish people have all saved.
Right.
2
I think
years of school.
my parents pushed us through school a lot faster than other people as well. So we tried to skip every single year that we
I
could.
think he's
You
trying
could
to
skip years as well.
Yeah, I think he's trying to say that he was clever.
No,
He's being humble about it.
Yeah, you could skip years. I didn't know.
Because here's the thing, I thought that high school, so university degrees are typically 4 years. So you end up going to university when you're 17, but you leave when you're 21. But you, mashallah, being extremely humble and didn't want to say that basically you were clever and you managed to skip
it wasn't. It was our parents wanted us to finish education as fast as
So
possible.
you could skip years.
I mean, like if you know people that are in the inside of the schools. So in primary school,
So contacts.
yeah, you have to have
it's turned into
contacts.
the Gulf.
But then also the Gulf.
You're calling our contacts, so telling you to skip years and stuff.
Hey, what you trying to say about the Gulf?
That's not going to start in the Gulf.
That's my specialization in my course at the moment. Actually,
What?
the Gulf.
The Gulf in general.
Yeah, that's.
I guess let's not talk about the Gulf.
Let's talk about the Gulf then. Isn't it?
Well, we can get to that. I can finish my education story.
You know, we need
before we get to
we need a
Libya and Haftar and the Gulf and all those.
Libya's not in the Gulf.
I know, but his degree is in North Africa, and
Although to a large extent, because the Gulf is like represented under the GCC, but Libya is pretty much one of the archetypes of the GCC, so it's usually represented with them.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, wow. See, this is very interesting. Please,
Let's go back to university.
Yeah, so I started university. So I studied. Well, initially I wanted to do architecture. I was very passionate and interested in architecture, but I missed it by a couple of points. So I went into structural engineering with architecture. I done that for a year. Tried out architecture for a year.
You did that for a year.
Yeah, so I done 2 first years. One structural engineering, then I done architecture for 1 year. Then went back into engineering to finish it off.
Okay.
During that whole time, so initially I wasn't very much engaged with the Islamic Society or interested in joining them. I was just getting on, even though all my brothers, they went through the Islamic Society and the FOSIS kind of pathway. But I personally wasn't interested. And then at the end of my first year, I had a couple of brothers who just encouraged me to come along to a meeting. So I popped into this meeting, and then by the end of the meeting, I ended up
being indoctrinated.
having to lead a whole camp.
He just said,
literally. That's so they told me I'll go sit at the front of the table. I'm like, okay, and then they're like, okay, you're leading this camp now. Just a camp, for young Muslims in that university. So that sense of responsibility, that very initial sense of responsibility, was something I've never felt before. Was, to a certain extent, what propelled me into all of this. So I led that camp. Of course, all of them were much older than me. I don't think I actually done anything, but it was just the fact that I was sitting at the front of the table for the first time. I was speaking to people, telling them what needed to be done and what didn't need to be done. And from there, I was just constantly encouraged to continue to be more and more active. SubhanAllah, I was completely down to the fact that a group of people, they saw me, they encouraged me heavily to get involved. If it wasn't for them, I don't know where I would have ended up. But that's where it began. It began with, that one room where I was told to come, even though I was, and that's one of the ways that we trick a lot of first years into joining the ISOC, telling them there's pizza at the AGM, and then you shove them into the ISOC.
Listen, mate, I don't know what practices you guys do, but I know in Sheffield that's not what we did.
I'm sure you do.
We were very
Really?
Rotherham. What about
Tell
Rotherham?
someone this pizza and then.
Yeah, everyone says that. Come on.
Whoa.
That's how you get them into the room. You get
The guy from Rochdale is making grooming gang jokes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Deflected away from your own little village.
anyways, international business management and MENA.
So I mean, I guess that's a question for you from a degree selection perspective.
Yeah.
How do you? I mean, obviously you were not completely sure about architecture. Then you went architecture, structural engineering. Then you did a complete jump across to another field. I don't think you've ever worked in engineering.
No, I haven't.
So after you graduated, you didn't do engineering. You found some other stuff, and now you've jumped into international politics management, international management, and
In the Middle East, yeah.
okay. So how does that work? What advice do you give young people in terms of selecting their degree? Do you regret choosing an engineering degree when you were going to end up somewhere so different anyway?
I don't regret anything, alhamdulillah. But
Nothing at all.
No, nothing.
No regrets.
No regrets. My journey was quite like throughout the whole journey, I was trying to figure out who I am. I think that's a big thing that a lot of young Muslims are trying to do. Like we're told, our whole life, okay, become an engineer, become a doctor. The stereotypical joke about immigrants. But then when I actually started engaging with Islamic society, I started organizing things. I started building both an Islamic and a personality for myself. I began to find out what I was actually interested in. I found I was interested in economics. I was interested in, management of organizations and how things work, within an organization.
So you want to focus more so on the practical side of international relations more than the theoretical
yeah. So that's for me, the management of international institutions is what I want to do.
So when you say international institutions, what do you mean?
So an institution is anything that lays down rules for how people should interact with each other.
So is that can that be like a company, or are you talking more of like the UN and NGOs and that kind of thing?
It could be a company if we're talking about something like Google, because Google does lay down the rules of how people interact with each other on the internet. But most companies are not institutions. So, the UN, the EU, governments, judicial systems, these are institutions. They lay down how we...
The Arab League?
The Arab League, but they're a very inefficient institution. I have a lot of qualms with Arab institutions.
You're firing shots left, right and centre. You're not holding back, are you? You're definitely Libyan. Please, carry on.
So that's what an institution is. It's something that lays down rules for how we should interact with each other as a society. That's why they call it the institution of marriage, or that's why traditions are institutions. It's because they lay down rules for how we interact with each other.
The way you said marriage, I looked across the table and I saw Assad. The guy looks so depressed. No wife yet.
Allah, you need a wife.
You need that institution in your life.
I need that institution. It's bad to me.
It's really sad.
Fasting as well. Let's change the topic.
Because he does look really sad. That's why I got a bit thrown off. But anyway, so that's quite. I didn't know that's the difference.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting way of describing it.
What in particular are you focusing on in terms of Middle East and North Africa? So what are you? Is your dissertation on the Arab League or?
No, so I'm doing this part time. So I'm doing my dissertation next year. Okay. But the focus of what I've been doing was looking at how institutions in the Middle East work. So how they lay down rules for how people should interact with each other, and especially how that relates to, the regime. So if you're an autocratic regime, how do you ensure that people abide by certain ways by laying down certain institutions, including, very social institutions like how culture is, enacted, etc.
So you as a student of international management in the Middle East, do you have a certain opinion when it comes to social interactions in states? So you dealing with an autocratic state, do you have an opinion on what's right and what's wrong, for example? Because you're coming from a Muslim background.
Yeah, of course I have a lot of personal opinions.
Would you ever support Assad in his quest for communism?
Which Assad are you talking about?
I don't know what this communism comes. This is the first time you're mentioning it. I'm not a communist, by the way.
Okay.
I'm not a socialist.
Good to know.
Yeah.
That's one of the other things that I focused quite a lot on. I wrote a whole essay on it recently. It's entrepreneurship and how entrepreneurship is one of the keys to economic growth. And you can see in the Middle East where entrepreneurship is very much stifled and it's, put down. You see massive economic kind of
But is that intentional, or is that just because there's so much bureaucracy and...
No, it's intentional. So it all comes down to state-business relations. It comes down to the way that, it all evolved. So, for example, in the Gulf, all of this evolved from trading families and ruling families. And then the ruling families were, so looking at it this way, I'm a trader and you're a ruler. I give you taxes and you take care of roads for me, you protect me, you take care of me on an international level. The moment that you now have the money as a ruler because you have all the oil, you don't need my taxes and you don't need me to tell you what to do anymore. So you can do whatever you want. So when you flip that switch and you don't have any more accountability, then that's where autocracy begins to come in. That's where now the autocrat, he doesn't want people to have money. He doesn't want new enterprises to come out. I remember in Libya, any company that would get big enough would eventually be bought up by the government by force, or you would have to become part of the bureaucratic, the bourgeoisie or whatever you want to call
The
them.
bootlickers.
Yeah,
So
the people who become part of the royal family. And
So you're basically any country that's autocratic. It's in their interest to not have a big middle class because those people will demand rights and things like that. Is that
now we have a very interesting example of China, which is changing the game for everything, and all of the Middle East is like looking at China as this new model for how to do things. So China is creating a middle class, it's creating a capitalist, rich class, but it's also doing it in a way where they're very much in line with the government. So that's
China's a bit of a sticky one because they are creating that middle class and they're creating a capitalist society through.
Yeah,
But they're still maintaining the communist.
But they're doing it
ideology.
through very kind of powerful surveillance tactics.
Well, it is
Yeah.
power tactics, isn't it?
Yeah.
In the region, they're kind of strong-arming a lot of policies within the region,
Yeah.
especially with the new Silk Road through Pakistan.
but the thing is, you have to realize, so in international relations, everything has context. So where does it come from? So China, the 19th and 20th century for China were very different from the 19th and 20th century for the Middle East. So they're not going to come out with the same institutions. They're not going to come out looking like each other. That's a really important distinction that needs to be made.
Okay, so yeah, but coming back to that kind of autocracy point is, I guess what you're one of the things that kind of just struck out at me is if you are an entrepreneur in a country that's autocratic, just the fact that you're doing your business, etc., that in itself is kind of an act of resistance. So the government wants to actively shut down everyone who does any business initiatives. I don't know if that sits in line because most governments, even autocratic ones, they do kind of profess to increase wealth and that's why there's so much subsidies and stuff for.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. You brought up subsidies. So what you're saying is right. Any GDP is going to consist to a large extent, of things other than oil and natural resources. You need a productive class, or you need a class within society that actually does, that engages in business, whether it's services, etc. But in a lot of these really rich, oil-rich countries, there's no actual productivity in the economy. So nothing new is being introduced. Everything is still oil money,
isn't it?
Everything is still oil money coming in different forms. So the oil money, it eventually seeps down to the people in the form of subsidies. So you as a businessman, if you remove government subsidies, your business will no longer exist. And when you do that, you don't have an incentive to actually grow your business as strong. You don't have an incentive to, internationalize your business, unless, of course, you become part of that, class which transcends, the merchant class, becomes part of the royal class. That's where, you start extending your hands elsewhere. It's quite, a deep topic.
I was speaking to Thakur about this before in the car, where I don't really think it's a problem for, especially the Gulf countries, in terms of the over-reliance in oil. I don't really think that's a problem. As a finite resource, when that runs out, I think it's not going to be a problem for them. Because they are Bedouins and they will return to be Bedouins.
Yeah, but so it's a problem from a growth perspective.
Of course,
is
it's
that
from
their
a growth
will-
perspective.
They won't be as because Saudi, for example, right now they get invited to G20 and stuff. How are they going to keep their influence and their kind of political
Their
punch?
oil right now is what keeps them on the world stage, 100%.
Which gives them an opportunity.
Yeah,
to
the geopolitics
bring
of
up a lot
oil.
change.
Yeah, the geopolitics of oil is very powerful, especially when these countries are very much kind of
There's a
linked
good
to.
movie to watch regarding that. It's called Syriana.
Oh yes, they pull the guy's fingers out in that.
Yeah.
Remember
It's
that?
a good movie.
I
That.
can't stand those type of
2006 or
scenes.
something.
There's also another documentary by Adam Curtis called Bitter Lake. Story to talk about as well. So this is it deals with the issue of oil as well, but at the time of Malik Faisal in Saudi Arabia. It's quite interesting. Yeah, just a bit of a shout out on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask one more question about states. When we think of, for example, the Ottomans, or I don't know if this is out of your scope, by the way, but when we think of like the Ottomans and other caliphate dynasties, they were very autocratic. But one of the ways that, for example, the Ottomans kept everything in check was they had business guilds, and then they had the traditional classes, like the ulama classes, that held kind of the Khalifa in check, and then they had the Janissary. So that kind of system was in place, but it was a very autocratic thing. Was that anti-business as well, or do you think that?
It would definitely need to be studied. I think you will definitely find books that will look into that in detail. I haven't personally read them, but that is definitely a question that we need to ask ourselves. So how will our economies work, or how have these economies worked, in a way that actually created enterprise? At the end of the day, by the way, like if they were, being run well with accountability, with economic development, with entrepreneurial kind of pioneership happening within them, we wouldn't really be where we are. We would be much further in terms of research. We would be much further in terms of where we are, on the world stage, and how our institutions, our educational institutions stand.
When you say we, who do you mean?
Oh, of course,
Irish people.
Irish people, yeah. I'm Irish.
The Muslims.
Yeah, as Muslims.
As an ummah.
As Muslims in the context of the 19th.
As Irish Muslims in Ireland, living in Ireland.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
So that's the thing. So Ireland in particular is very interesting because they're very pro-business, and so many big companies have their headquarters there. I'm sure you guys would be very interested with your tax evasive. And,
Ireland has like ridiculous. It's pretty much a tax haven. It's like 12% for businesses.
Which I think economically, though, they argue that corporate tax from a purely economic, like most economists say, corporate tax is a bad thing because if you have lower corporate tax, companies are allowed to do more. So you should be taxing people for not doing stuff rather than for doing stuff, which is corporate tax effectively. I know the kind of the background behind that is you're using resources that the government put there, but from a corporate tax perspective, it's on corporate income. So as a company, if you do more, you get taxed more, and therefore, I think there's another podcast called Planet Money where they have an episode where they actually cover corporate tax and how historically it used to be zero, but because of Ireland, that kind of got me back to business and how you've worked for Google, which every time someone talks about Google, it's very intriguing because it's supposed to be one of those companies which is really hard to get into, and it's a very enriching, fulfilling experience. And you go in there, and there's cooks and
there's pool tables and slides and stuff.
Free
and
food,
they have, like,
free
swimming
snacks,
pools.
free. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that, and like again, how did that fit into your journey of going from an engineer to an international manager? What step was that at? And
so in Google, so I was working in YouTube. Specifically, it's not even a subsidy, it's just part of the Google business. And what I was doing was supporting young or growing YouTubers who are trying to build their channel, who are trying to figure out how it works. A lot of times because we were dealing specifically with the Middle East, we were dealing with a lot of spam and a lot of issues, but that was...
So the YouTubers were based in the Middle East?
So all the ones that I dealt with were based in the Middle East.
Okay, so how did you liaise with them?
So we emailed. So we were the email support, basically. Yeah.
Okay, so why is there more spam in the Middle East compared to like the West?
That was a question that we always asked ourselves actually inside, because we within our department you had all the countries or languages actually within the region of EMEA, so Europe, Middle East, and Africa, or Europe, Middle East, and Africa, yeah, and for some reason, we would just deal with so much more spam. And it was a lot more people trying to make money out of YouTube in ways where, it was illegal.
Just guys sliding into people's DMs or...
No. We're talking about people who would create like 1,000 accounts to try to make... and then make, those 1,000 accounts watch one single YouTube video so they would make more money, if that would make sense.
Oh, right. Okay,
we're talking about
that
type of spam.
It's not like Nigerian Prince type of spam.
No.
It's fraud. That's quite defrauding behavior.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's of course because it's YouTube, so it's not really fraud. It's fraud for YouTube rules, but you're not actually breaking any actual laws.
Yeah, direct
and
laws,
you're of course you're in the Middle East, so there's not the laws there.
YouTube pays their partners based on how many views they get.
Ad revenue, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So these are people are creating false bots and just hitting that page.
That's just one of the examples.
Can we do that? No?
One thing that I've realized, there's huge amount of ingenuity there. So a lot of people are trying to make money in so many different ways, and they'll come up with the most creative ways possible.
And you were just an autocrat trying. You were just an autocrat trying to stop them from
no, so our job was more.
entrepreneurial.
Yeah, exactly. We were dealing more with people that were a bit more established, that were trying to build their YouTube audiences. We had to we dealt with that every morning. We'd just go in and we'd wipe all the spam, and then we'd start actually dealing with people who were genuinely trying to build an audience for themselves.
So with you, when you were supporting these YouTubers, were these YouTubers big YouTubers, number one? And did you approach the YouTubers first, or did they approach you first?
So we dealt with people with over 100,000 subscriptions.
Okay.
And we dealt with people all the way up to the millions of subscriptions. So we dealt with some institutions, even government institutions and big institutions.
FBI.
No, it's all in the Middle East. So Mukhabarat.
Well, they do have some. I don't know. There's some. So there's a big Twitter. I think there was some time ago. There was like a Twitter campaign. So people who supported Qatar, for example, were blacklisted or things like that. Does that? I know that's Twitter, not YouTube, but I don't know.
We didn't really deal with that. So what we dealt with was just your Joe, who's there trying to make a YouTube channel for himself, is trying to make money
Joe
from
in
that.
the Middle East.
There's many Joes there.
I guess how that applies to us is how do you have any tips for us to kind of increase our, because we're YouTube, well, we're podcasters, but we're on YouTube. You can catch us on Spotify, YouTube, any of your podcatching platforms,
iTunes.
Yeah.
I mean, how many subscriptions do you guys have?
I think it's very, because we've started.
I may be too expensive for you guys right now.
We're in the double digits, so we're not nowhere near your 6-digit level. So we're just trying to get you in for free.
Yeah.
Listen, but
23.
23, mashallah.
Yes, we've just started off.
Yeah,
on YouTube page.
YouTube's not the strongest. I think iTunes is probably the strongest.
Yeah.
But YouTube is definitely a great place to make money, to build an audience, to engage with your audience, especially if you're doing live shows. But you do need to build that audience externally to YouTube, or use big YouTubers initially to try to prop yourself and to push your name out there. There's a lot of different tactics that you can find. You can with your consistency, with how different your programs are to everyone else on YouTube, how original you guys are. There's quite a lot of things you can do.
But yeah, so you worked with those people at Google, but did you have the swimming pools and the cool stuff? And did you feel incredibly inspired working at Google?
So this is a whole other topic. So I was actually working as a contractor in Google. So as contractors, you don't get all the perks. We do get free food and free snacks, but we didn't.
Free food? Like, do you mean like actual food?
Yeah, actual food. Yeah,
like chicken,
But like actual, like so, we actually
food, yes.
I have a friend of mine who works in Google now, and we've interacted with a lot of Googlers, and the amount of things.
Sorry.
We've Googlers.
Googlers.
Oh god.
Well, we're all Googlers because we Google things.
No. Googlers are people who work in Google.
So people who use Google are called.
So when you were in Google, were you a
people.
Googler or were you a pseudo?
No, we were pseudo Googlers. Although they tried to pretend we were Googlers
to make you feel nice.
Yeah, exactly.
Inclusive.
Exactly.
Oh, wow.
They're quite inclusive.
So you actually called pseudo Googlers?
No. They would call us Googlers, but we knew we weren't Googlers because we didn't get any of the real perks.
Oh, the real perks.
What are the real perks?
Yeah, what are the real
So the
perks?
people that worked, well, first of all, you get access to what you mentioned. You get swimming pool. You get, this massive building that is full of, different services. You get access to stocks. You get access to, therapy sessions and massages and, a whole bunch of things. Like, it's pretty much a campus, especially the one in Dublin. So it's the second headquarters in the world.
Where's the first?
The one in California, of course.
Palo Alto. Right? Palo Alto?
Yeah, it was.
I thought it was in London, wasn't it? Google.
Yeah, they also have a big office here in London.
So Dublin's the second biggest one.
Yeah,
I
They're
think
building
not,
something in London. They're building
I think
something
Abdesami just sold you that to convince you.
No,
that
they
it's the
did.
center of the
I was
universe.
actually at the Google offices yesterday.
They're actually building two
Interesting.
huge offices in London right now.
I bet they are. Yeah,
And
that's
it will be
nice.
it will be bigger than the one in Dublin.
Was it very like? Is it because their work hours are so crazy that they need to do things like therapy and?
No, they had all of these different reasonings, especially the people who created the company. They're like, we want these people to live with each other, interact with each other, discuss business, over food, over, life. It's pretty much blurring the lines between where your life begins and where work begins.
Okay.
It's essentially speaking, it's created a whole ecosystem, isn't it?
Yeah.
Of Googlers. Yeah.
Literally, like your whole life is basically about Google, and you eat Google, you sleep Google, you social life is Google.
sounds great to me. But you know,
Like the food, I could just tell you, like the food, I remember they would bring in halal food. They literally have, you know, high quality chefs there making it on the spot for you every single day. It's like going to a free buffet on a daily basis, you know. So
I just pulled you there by saying that we're fasting, yeah?
yeah, of
so
course.
that's quite cool. But I think that's a very interesting. But I think I diverted and just took the whole conversation to Google there because I'm a bit of a fanboy. It'd be the same if you had
one of my-
we forgive you. We
yeah.
forgive you. I mean, you have many faults, and that's one of them. But you have other good qualities about
Yeah.
yourself. You've got the face for radio. So
Yes,
'Cause I actually wrote one of my essays. I'm a fanboy as well to a certain extent, but I wrote one of my essays on Google's global operations, and I used it recently trying to get into one of their interviews. So,
Very
fellow
nice.
fanboy.
Okay, alhamdulillah. But you left Google some time ago, and then that's when you kind of. So you did. I guess that's more software work, or is that how? What does that count as? Your work that you did at Google supporting international YouTubers.
It would be more. They weren't really customers; they were partner support.
Okay.
So they were YouTube partners, and you just support them. Yeah.
Okay, and then you transitioned into your international management degree.
Yeah.
Okay, so whenever you do your dissertation, I think it'll be very interesting to talk to you about, especially if you do a dissertation on Haftar and how everything's worked out and
Yeah.
how people can just make sense of that from a political perspective.
So my master's is, although politics is quite a big part of it, is very much focusing on business in the Middle East. So how does business work? What are the different levels to it? How much do you have to engage with the political structures? How the economic structures look like, and then what are the management styles? You know, what's the culture in companies on the ground? Everything from the top to the bottom. That's what my master's is pretty much covering.
Okay.
Different to mine,
Yeah. Well, we had a whole kind of.
You studying the same thing?
I'm studying security and international law. So there's more to do with I've got a relationship between human rights law and law of armed conflicts.
And
He-
drone strikes
Drone
and
strikes.
how
he's basically
how to
studying
deal.
about prevent and
How is that to do with it? Prevent drone strikes.
no security.
Quilliam do drone strikes. All right, that's nice.
I think that's as fast as getting to him. But we had a whole kind of. We wanted to ask you a lot more about FOSIS, but I think we're running out of time. We need to wrap it up
Yeah.
because Assad needs to get back for iftar. He's already getting cranky. So,
Been away for 28 hours now. 28.
so
Huh?
alhamdulillah.
YOLO.
With, with that, Jazakallah khair. You've been really inspiring. I think I didn't expect the conversation to go into your life experience as much and kind of just lose the FOSIS aspect. So hopefully it'll be great to have you back or other people from FOSIS and talk more about the work they do in terms of representing students, etc. But Jazakallah khair. You can listen to the Middle West podcast on YouTube, Spotify, any of your podcatchers, Pocket Casts, iTunes, whatever you use, Google Podcasts. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Give us a 5 out of 5 star rating on iTunes. If you like this episode, if you didn't, then wait till you find an episode that you do like, and then give us a 5 out of 5 stars.
Or just give it 5 stars anyway, regardless.
No, that would be corrupt. But yeah, Jazakumullah khair. See you in another episode of the Middle West podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Musa, signing off. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.